My name's Steve Mason from Bytes. I'm responsible for the NHS and healthcare within Bytes from a security perspective. So I'm just going to provide you a quick overview and rundown of Bytes for anyone who isn't aware of us, a brief piece on the purpose of the webinar, and then hand over to Tom Kendrick from Checkpoint. So Bytes, as you may be aware, is split into two areas, licensing and security. The licensing side, you're probably aware we're the largest Microsoft house in the UK and look after all aspects of licensing from Symantec, McAfee, Oracle, just to name a few. We then have the security side, which is where I sit, which from the slide on the screen, which is just coming up now, you can probably see we concentrate purely on the perimeter security and data security. So covering areas like firewalling, web security, email security, down to the endpoint with port control, hard disk encryption, remote access, and then areas like advanced persistent threats. So this basically just allows us to not be a jack of all trade and a master of none, because we absolutely have a clear focus on both areas, because we're actually split into two different teams. So one of the vendors that we look after, which you'll probably see from the presentation, is actually Checkpoint. We've been a partner now with Checkpoint for probably 10 plus years, I think, maybe even a little bit more. We now hold the 4-star Elite accreditation. So as a top-level partner, a top-level partner is actually a 4-star partner. We are one above that, being a 4-star Elite partner, which is invite only. The reason we hold this is because of our expertise in the technology and our support offering. So we have the largest number of Checkpoint accredited engineers in the channel, and the main reason for being awarded the Elite status is because of our support offering. We've got a very unique service where we have no first line or second line engineers. So when you call our help desk, you go straight into a senior, fully accredited escalation level Checkpoint engineer. This obviously saves a huge amount of time, as you're not asked the standard qualifying questions you get when speaking with the first and second line guys. Our engineers on the help desk actually also run on a 3-month rotation. So for 3 months they're actually out in the field attending customer sites to perform installations, upgrades, training, and sort of getting real world experience and an understanding hopefully of your network. But then come back into the help desk and spend 3 months on the help desk. So this means that when you call into the help desk, the person answering the phone has probably attended your site and at some point and hopefully understands your network and is able to resolve any of the queries that you may have as quickly as possible. It's also worth mentioning that 89% of our calls are actually resolved in-house, so we don't escalate anything really back to Checkpoint. It's really only RMAs and bug fixes that we would ever go back to Checkpoint with. The industry standard, just so you're aware on that, is around sort of 30%. So I did also just include a quick one there on the Gartner report, just showing where Gartner are the leader, sorry, Checkpoint are the leader on Gartner, and have been since about 1997, so that's on the enterprise network firewalling piece. So the reason for joining the webinar, which hopefully you're all keen for us to get on to, is really around the NHS and obviously the healthcare in general and the targeted attacks that some of you may be seeing at the moment, particularly around ransomware. I'm sure you've seen over just the last few weeks, I've certainly had my email account spammed with regards to news headlines that have been hitting with regards to the NHS and healthcare. So on the screen is just a few over literally the last sort of, I think, 4 to 6 weeks, some of the headlines that we've been seeing, and it's probably the #1 topic that we're being called for at the moment to try and help with the situation that you guys are currently seeing and help overcome these issues. So I'll now hand over to Tom Kendrick from Checkpoint. Tom, are you there? You should be live about now.
I am indeed, yep. Good. Okay, so hopefully everyone can see and hear me. So all good there. So hopefully everyone can see my screen at the moment. If someone can give me a quick nod from me from your side, Steve. So yeah, well,
yeah, it's all good.
Great stuff. So welcome everybody. My name is Tom Kendrick, a European threat prevention engineer working for Checkpoint in the UK office. Historically, I was an employee of Bytes around 6 or so years ago. Since then, I moved to Checkpoint, say around 6 years ago, and for the previous 5 years, I was working in the channel team as an engineer. And then around a year ago, I moved into a European role. Now, what we're going to do here is try and give you a few little bits of insight on things that we can do to help you ultimately avoid becoming the next victim of ransomware within your trust or NHS organisation. So, off we go. So, the agenda for the session. Firstly, we're going to cover off the problem. Okay, so the problem we've got to address is ransomware, and really our view is the way that the guys that write the ransomware are attacking the lifeblood of the trust themselves. We'll look at the impact. So obviously Steve has mentioned the impact that he's seen, the things that have come up in news and media recently. I'm going to look at a slightly wider view. My opinion is, like it or not, my view is actually a health trust is ultimately just as scrutinized, if not more so, than many commercial organizations, and I'm sure have got a huge number of tests and checks that must be put in place with people like HSCIC. So we're going to look at the kind of the impact on when something does go wrong. We're going to look at the options, and we're going to cover a couple of things on the technology side and some things on the people side. And I think it's worth mentioning at this point that one without the other will only get you so far. Technology can help people, and people can be aided, as we say, by this technology, but it also does rely on the awareness of the user community to make sure they're not doing anything silly. We're going to do questions and follow-up at the end of the session. So if you do have any questions, then obviously pop them into the chat, and we'll try and handle those all in one go for you at the end. And for those that don't know, the session is being recorded, so we can give you access to the recording later, and hopefully that will give you a chance to take a look at it offline as well if you need to. So, away we go. Let's take a look at the problem. Now, I think if I was to kind of look at how malware has evolved over the past even 2 or 3 years, maybe going back a little bit further, historically what we tended to see was malware was deployed as executable files, or something delivered in an archive, or some sort of binary file that was run on your machine. And as a result, what tended to happen was many organizations were able to quickly address these file types. Okay, so what would happen was we could say, based on the file extension, initially, I am not going to allow COM files, batch files, exe files, archive files to be downloaded by my majority of my user community, so I'm able to reduce the risk. What we tended to find then was the bad guys, and I know even from my own experience in Bytes, back in the day what you used to be able to do was when you were sharing files with customers and you wanted to deliver an executable file into their system, often you could just change the file extension and then get the end user to change that extension back at the end, at their end. Now, what then evolved was files have a component called the file magic, which is like a fingerprint of the file type itself. And what more modern systems would do is they would look at that file magic and say, regardless of the file extension, by looking at the file magic, I can understand what the type of file this is, and therefore I can still ensure that these files don't get into the organization. So that left a kind of a bitter taste in the bad guys' mouths, because their opportunity to cause trouble was greatly reduced. So what the attackers started to do was to look and investigate avenues that we can't turn off. And they also looked to target probably the greatest weakness that we have within our organizations. So the kind of files that they would target are the kind of files that you have to accept. So things like document files, Adobe files, PDF files. So these files that we know that we need to receive day to day to carry on doing what we're doing in the trusts, those are the files that they will try and target. And what they will do is they'll get more and more intelligent, and they'll increase the complexity with which they send the file, often just trying to make sure that file looks legitimate enough. So I was working with a partner just last week where they got sent a piece of malware that was trying to detonate, and what we saw with this piece of malware was the bad guys had written a front page onto the malware that said, due to the upgrades in Office 2016, please can you click this button to enable the content so the Office 2016 file can be seen properly. It was exactly in Microsoft's colors, the right kind of modern contrasting look and feel that we would see from a Microsoft message, the current Microsoft logo. But when I queried the guy and said, well, why would you need to enable this content for a docx file? They're no different in this version versus that. All of a sudden it dawned on him that this wasn't just a new file that we were trying to handle, this was attempted malware. And if it can pick on people who are very, very experienced in security, then imagine what it can be like for end users who've got far, far more important jobs to get on with at the moment. So we also are very aware that most systems today, especially the end user systems, are very vulnerable to advanced attacks. And again, the bad guys tend to target those users at the wrong time. So when we're heading into weekends, we have seen an increase in spear phishing attacks. So just to give you a quick indication here, this graph in the bottom right-hand corner, these are the Zeus detections just coming over Christmas. Okay, so just as you were coming across Christmas, these were the Zeus detections that we saw within Checkpoint's threat cloud. And you can see that the kind of times that the bad guys are trying to target people was, let's target people on that run-up to the Christmas holidays, the run-up to the Christmas parties, when people are kind of a little bit more relaxed. Let's try and target the people, and we saw such an increase in the number of detections within Threat Cloud, it almost made our day-to-day detections disappear. So these guys are really smart as well. They're trying to target the people at the right kind of time. Now, let's take a look at an example. So let's say, for example, we have a worker from a trust who is eating their lunch at a cafe, and they're being the kind of the diligent employee that we know today. So they're checking their work email, but at the same time, what they also do is they sign into their own email as well. So they sign into Gmail or their Apple email account, and they accidentally click on a link and download some malware from a phishing message. Okay, what's the impact? Well, with modern malware, the Trust antivirus just won't pick it up. And it's also not going to detect the incident in any way. I was with a customer just a few weeks ago where I saw Locky on their machine, and their AV system had absolutely no idea that anything bad was going on, whereas I could see all sorts of conversations on the endpoint and the network of the downloads of files that were happening behind the scenes. So in this kind of situation, something like CryptoLocker, as one example of ransomware, will infect her machine. Now, let's say we're lucky. Let's say we're not on a VPN. Let's say the data was backed up, and let's say that we could re-image the machine. The kind of questions that we're asking ourselves as cyber teams, as the information governance officer, as the information security officer, is where else did this file go? Will it come back? And was any data lost, impacted, or encrypted? So these are the kind of questions that we're asking ourselves. Ultimately, our view is to improve security, we need to have a better understanding of what is going on in the network and on the endpoint. Now, again, the research that Checkpoint does and the ability for you guys to keep yourself up to date is a challenge. It's very difficult to keep up to date with the very, very latest and greatest bits of malware and malware families that are out at the moment. So to try and give you some assistance, please take a look at our blog site. In there, you'll see the research papers that we publish. So here you can see one on the nuclear exploit kit, the EK, where, as we've seen the EK evolve and develop over time, we will show you how the kind of the malware as a service market is growing and how you can try and use protections here to make sure that nothing bad happens to your environment. Another quick example, the Costa ransomware family. Again, it's something that kind of moved from a police scareware to click fraud and then into ransomware. So again, it shows you the kind of evolution that the malware writers have. And then finally, there's a paper that we wrote on a new variant of Locky. So Locky being one of the most recently talked about ransomware families that are available. So again, it's really worth you taking a few minutes just looking through the threat research papers that we publish, because in there we do try and tell you the ways that we can reduce the risk and protect your environment. Now, if we take a look at the impact, what is the impact to us as a trust, us as an NHS organisation? Well, I suppose there's a couple of things. Firstly, we can look at something like productivity loss. So I was working with a telco in the UK. I went in to see them just a few weeks ago, and I was in a meeting where they told me that a message was sent to them allegedly from the DVLA. It got sent to all of their employees, and unfortunately with the UK employees being aware of the DVLA, a number of people clicked this message. The result was this whole organisation in the UK, which is many thousands of users, was told, don't use email this weekend. So kind of take an early break on a Friday afternoon. We'll let you know when things are back up. There's also financial loss. And this can be financial loss in redirection of funds, or this can be financial loss in the case of fines. Now, an example that we had from a US customer, we had a US customer that we're working with that, again, just because of user education and because of using some of the web-based email services, they were shoulder surfed. And by being shoulder surfed, the financial controller's details were stolen. Someone signed in as them, and again, because all of their emails and sent emails were online, they were able to craft an email to their clients asking them to update their payment details for the run this weekend. And again, unfortunately, I never like to say millions of dollars, but again, this was a US customer, but millions of dollars were then redirected elsewhere. Okay. The other angles we can see are, as we are very much aware of, data loss and encryption. So we've seen this, and we're not mentioning any names, but we've seen this with a number of businesses in the UK and also a number of councils, where as soon as you get in the media, it impacts your organization, it impacts the trust and the belief in you that your users have, your clients, if you will, have as well. And what's more scary is by the time our incident response team get involved, often we can see some of these incidents, some of these ransomware incidents actually get linked back to funding terrorist groups as well. So there's a real knock-on effect with paying these ransoms. So within Checkpoint, we try and give our end customers the expertise in manageable, usable protections and technologies. So within Checkpoint, we're the largest dedicated security vendor in the world, over 3,700 employees, and forming part of those groups are dedicated malware analyst teams, threat monitoring teams, reverse engineering, research, and incident response teams. And it's all of these groups that work behind the scenes to help make our products, to help give you the protections, and to help take away that burden of making sure everything is going okay. Now, regardless of whatever we try and do, we always have an awareness that at some point something may happen. So if we take a look at the Verizon breach investigation report from 2015, there were nearly 80,000 security incidents and around 2,000 confirmed data breaches. And one of the key things that we want to make sure that you can do is to avoid that headless chicken moment, is to be able to say that we can effectively respond, efficiently respond, understand the impact, the damage. So as the ISO or as the information governance officer or as part of the cybersecurity team, how is it that you can understand and limit and recover from any incident that you may see as quickly as possible? And this is not just us that are facing these challenges. This is not just NHS. This is a worldwide challenge. So Poneman, they did a research paper where they discussed with a number of US and EMEA organizations that had been attacked. After the breach, how many of you were able to successfully answer and understand the attack that took place? So when we're looking at who attacked you, only half of the people knew who attacked. 40% were able to understand the attack method. 60% were able to understand where they were attacked, and again, that's generally pretty evident because that's the first place where data starts to go missing. But worryingly, when we look at the when they were attacked, why they were attacked, and most importantly, the defense method that could be used in the future, around 2/3 of the people weren't able to understand if this was to happen again, how would I make sure I could defend against this happening? So if we look at the options we have, if we take a look at the options, as I said, my view is this is kind of a partnership between people and technology. Now, some of the people side is user education. And this is something that we won't ever really, in my view, be able to get away from. But what we do need to consider is there may be additional people that you might need to call on yourselves. So if you're part of the response team within the trust, how is it that if there is an incident, can you call upon people to help you out? And there is somewhere where we could see the checkpoint incident response team help. But from a technology side, there are also technologies that we can use to make sure we can prevent the bad things coming in as quickly and as fast as possible. So firstly, there is the checkpoint sandblast sandbox. We're going to look at this in more detail, but this is an evasion-resistant unknown malware protection system that can ensure that both known and unknown malware never even make it inside the organization. There's threat extraction. Now, one of the things that we were very, very much aware of at Checkpoint is within many organizations, there's a huge, huge amount of data flowing around. And again, this is true for NHS. Now, one thing that we know is that most of the time, especially in NHS, time is key. So whilst we have a very, very fast sandbox, the fastest sandbox in the industry, we also need to make sure that our technologies that give security don't get in the way of user experience and delivery of files. So threat extraction allows us to give immediate delivery of clean files, so Office documents and PDF documents. We can give you a clean and rebuilt version of that file pretty much instantly without any delay. And then finally, we have forensics, and forensics is here to look at information that lands on the endpoint. So if we, as we'll do in a while, if we go back to our example that we saw earlier on, how could that additional information that we understand about the endpoint and the attack have meant that we could automatically remediate any sort of attack and clean up both the machine and the wider network. So if we look at how we can provide technology to help the people, let's look at what Sandblast can do for us. So firstly, when we look at Checkpoint Sandblast as a technology, we have two options. So we need to see your data. Now, we may be seeing your data as emails, we may be seeing your data as web traffic, we may be seeing your data on the endpoint itself. Regardless of this, once the data is collected, the data is then emulated either in Checkpoint's cloud or in private appliances. And when we're looking at the Checkpoint cloud exists in Germany, it exists in Israel, and it also exists in the US. And you can decide where you want your emulation to take place. So if you want your emulation to only take place inside the EU, then that's fine. If you would rather the emulation took place only in the UK, then again you can use one of the Sandblast appliances and you can ensure that the data is emulated on site and nothing will leave the site itself. So how does Sandblast work? And let's have a look at how sandboxing works in general. So what sandboxing does is sandboxing takes a file that's about to be delivered into the organization, it runs it in a virtual machine before it arrives to the endpoint, and it looks at registry communications, it looks also at network traffic, it looks at file system activity and system processes. And it will look at these things and it will make a judgment call on whether the things that it has seen were good or bad activity. So behind here you have clever technologies like machine learning, where again based on enormous data sets, it can make a judgment whether the file is either good or whether the file is bad. Now if we look at what the emulation is there to do, the emulation has 4 steps. So we inspect the file, we emulate the file, we prevent the bad file coming into the network, and we turn what was unknown into a known. That way we can help the wider community. So if we look at the inspection stage, what happens is we look at both web traffic and mail traffic. So we can look at TLS encrypted mail, we can look at clear text SMTP, we can look at HTTP traffic, and we can look at HTTPS traffic. We can also look at traffic running across Windows shares across the gateway as well. Once we see these data streams, we inspect and we look and we pick up Java, Flash, executables, archives, PDF documents, and Office documents. And we take those files and we send them to a virtual sandbox. The virtual sandbox is where the file runs, and today we have Windows XP, Windows 7 and Windows 8.1 already available, and we have Windows 10 and Windows 10 on the roadmap, and also if you wish we can do image customization. We offer both 32 and 64-bit OS support depending on the platform itself, and the sandbox devices and the sandbox cloud are both evasion resistant. So as we said, we'll open the file and we'll monitor the behavior, looking for unusual activity that we deem as malicious. Once we see that malicious activity, then as Checkpoint we can provide inline blocking. So again, it's a unique thing that there's only 1 or 2 of us that can do in this industry. We can stop that bad file ever getting to the victim machine in the first place. And then finally, as we said, once we see the unknown file now become a known piece of malware, we can share the file into Threat Cloud, and Threat Cloud will then mean subsequent detections of the same file can come straight from cache and can be instantly prevented. So what was unknown is now unknown. So that's the emulation. Let's look at what extraction can do for us. So if you remember, extraction is there to cater for that challenge that regardless, we know that however fast our emulation product is, we know users want their files now. We want their files fast. And this is, as I said, ever so important, especially in places like NHS. So what threat extraction does is threat extraction says, I'm going to take the original file, I'm going to reconstruct it, and I'm going to give you a safe, clean copy of that file without any macros, without any code, without any active links. What this means is this, in just one product, can pretty much get rid of any sort of ransomware that's triggered by macros or code. Because what we can do is we can offer two options here. We can either deliver the file in the same format that it came in. So for example, we can take a Word document, reconstruct the file but take out the active content and keep it as a Word document and deliver that to the end user. Or we can take that original file, so a PDF, a Word, an Excel, a PowerPoint, and we can convert that file to a PDF. Either of these technologies, either of these approaches are very, very beneficial when trying to address the ransomware challenge. Now, obviously, within places like the NHS, there may be a certain time where you may need access to the original file. You may need those macros or you may need that code. And we don't want to add any extra burden to your administrators or any delay to the end user. So while we can deliver the clean file straight away, should you want access to the original file, you can see on the left here there's a link that says click here if the original file is needed. What happens is you'll get taken to our threat extraction portal, and the portal will say, if you can confirm for me that the files are coming from a trusted source, and you can give me a reason that these files are clean and are good and are safe and can be trusted, then as long as I emulate the file and I find that there are no malicious activities, then yes, you can have the original file as well. So it gives you the best of both worlds. Now, I want to just quickly touch on another unique feature that we have within the technology group, which is our CPU level detection. And this is, again, it's something that's unique to Checkpoint. And the way that we kind of discuss the CPU level engine that we have inside our sandbox is to take that idea of what if. And our question was, what if we could detect the exploit instead of just looking for the result of the evasive malware? So if we can detect the exploit stage, then actually everything that happens afterwards, we kind of don't care. We know something bad is going to happen. And it's with this CPU level engine that's part of our appliances, part of our cloud, and available for files emulated via the endpoint with the agents as well, that we can grab a file that needs emulating. We can send it into our sandbox, and we can activate a debug feature created by Intel for BIOS developers. But we at Checkpoint, we use this technology for security. And what we look for are the inconsistencies in the execution flow of the program. So just like if you were going from place A to place B, you know that if you turn left and then right, then left and then right, if you want to get back again, you need to follow those same steps. When malware tries to exploit the machine, what happens is we see all sorts of unusual and inconsistent flows in the machine itself. And here is where our engine kicks in. We can detect those inconsistencies and then understand that what's about to happen is going to be malware. Now, obviously, again, we discuss here working together. Now, we looked at the three different components of Sandblast. We looked at the threat extraction. So how does threat extraction, how does emulation and CPU level products all tie together? Well, firstly, this is one and the same product. When you turn this on, all of these capabilities are available to you. The first thing that we will do is, if we can deliver you a safe version of the file quickly with threat extraction, then that's what we do first. But whilst that emulation is taking, whilst that extraction has taken place, we are running both our OS level and our CPU level engines at the same time, so that if the file is found to be malicious, then the malware gets stripped out. So what the user will get is either a safe version of the document or malware-free version of a document or a file. Okay, so that's how these technologies sit and work hand in hand. Now, I also want to discuss data loss prevention. And this is another capability that's available to you to run on your checkpoint gateway. Now, if we take a look at what's going on here, let's say I have an attacker out there on the internet on the right-hand side, and they try and send me something that is malicious. Let's say that mail gets to my mail server. Let's say that my employee on their machine clicks the file, downloads some malware. Let's say that I don't have any of the emulation capabilities turned on at the time. Be aware that with Sandblast agents and with the security gateway, they both will block traffic passing or communicating with command and control servers. But even if the data was trying to be sent to a brand new, never been seen before, unknown command and control server, you can run DLP, so data loss prevention technologies, on your checkpoint gateways, and it can inspect traffic in web, including HTTPS, in email, and also in FTP. And it can make sure that no information relating to the healthcare industry is ever released from your organization without you knowing about it. So again, a really, really powerful set of technologies that you can have there. Now, let's say, for example, we do need people. Let's say we do need these people that can sit within the checkpoint organization to help you out when there is an incident. Firstly, the traditional approach to many technologies are detection only. So many technologies out there on the market will do detection. They will gather loads of logs, so you'll pay a fortune for these things to get analyzed in the cloud or on premise. And then someone will send you a little event that says, I suggest that you've just been attacked and all your data was lost. Here's what you should now do. Now, that's not the kind of approach that we want within Checkpoint Emergency Response Team. So our view ultimately is we should be doing prevention first. So let's stop all the bad things from ever coming in, if at all possible. Now, if we do have an incident, maybe from a third-party device, we need to still understand, respond, and remediate. So this would be the Checkpoint Incident Response Team's approach to making sure nothing happens that makes any incident any worse. Now, when can you contact Checkpoint Incident Response Team? Firstly, just to say, anyone, be they a Checkpoint customer or not, can have a free call when you're having a problem to our IRT. So if you want details of the number, again, we can arrange that through Steve. So there's a UK number, there's a US number, there's an email address. You can contact that team if you are under attack. Now, for those customers that do work with our IRT, and do take on a service from the IRT, there are three phases when the guys can help: pre-attack, under-attack, and post-attack. So pre-attack, what they would tend to do is they would do strategy and planning events. They will actually do intelligence sharing. So with some of our banking customers, we monitor the dark web, and we could actually inform them and advise them of when DDoS attacks were about to begin. And the guys will also evaluate your existing attack surface. Again, does not matter whether you're a checkpoint customer or not. Under attack, again, pick up the phone, call them. There's guys based all around the world. They will help with infestations of malware. They will help with DDoS attacks. They'll help with data loss, and they'll help with suspicious events that you may have seen inside your trusts. And then post-attack, they can do attack analysis. They can do forensics. They have a malware lab where they can see what the malware was going to do. And again, they can also provide you with assistance and reporting up to senior management should you need it. And this is the kind of times where our guys are also, as I mentioned before, seeing the links back to terror organizations when they do analysis on the malware themselves. So to give you a quick idea of the kind of work that the guys do, so what do the IRT team do day to day? We were contacted on the 1st September last year following a critical incident from a non-checkpoint customer. The reason we were contacted is one of our employees was actually a member of the governor board of a special needs school in the US. So we were contacted and we were asked to investigate an incident. The IR team actually requested the firewall logs and the proxy logs from this customer. Again, this was not a checkpoint house, so our guys are perfectly capable of understanding and reviewing third-party proxy and third-party firewall logs. Now, what happened is, from their log analysis, they were able to discover some possible source addresses that they thought were a little bit unusual. And after a couple of days, they were able to find 14,000 suspicious IP addresses, all linked to one Nigerian company. So then they started to trace back a little bit more. Now, on the 15th of July, a number of phishing emails were sent to the teachers at this school, and in the state where these guys were, because it's a special needs school, every teacher has to have their details published, because then every parent can see who is teaching them and they can do any sort of checks if they wish. Now, unfortunately, the bad guys got hold of this list, and what they started to do was they started to send out links to the teachers, and what then happened was they used that to steal credentials to the payroll system. From there, what they saw was the machines accessing the malicious site, and ultimately what the bad guys did was they diverted the salaries from the bank accounts of the teachers to prepaid credit cards. And guess what? That was the day when we got called. Yeah, that was the day when the guys noticed what had gone on. So let's take a little look again further at the third component of what we can do here when we look at the insight that we can get from the endpoint. And here is where there is a sandblast agent that you can deploy to your endpoint machines, which gives you that extra insight. So what does a sandblast agent do? Well, firstly, it prevents attacks, it identifies and contains infections, and it also, as we've discussed, automatic incident analysis comes out of this product. If you remember our example from earlier where we've got our person at the cafe, they've clicked on the link and then something bad has gone on and their data has been lost and encrypted, what could we have done? Firstly, we need to kind of set ourselves in our mind as cyber teams, as ISOs, as information governance officers. We're thinking kind of different questions to maybe the user. We're thinking the questions like, how did the malware get in? And why didn't my AV pick it up? Well, within the software, there are what we call entry point logs. So we can see how the file came into the organization, and we can see the detailed flow, a detailed timeline of the events that led up to that malware being triggered on the machine. Because this software sits on the endpoint, because this software records all the time, we can actually track back malware running on the machine from what we call the trigger event. So in this case, this may have been a file or an executable. In our case, it was chatting to a command and control server. But because we are recording all the interactions on the system all of the time, we can track back further, even across reboots. So we can see here, this is where the exploitation took place, and this is where the malware dropper downloaded and installs the malware. And tracking back even further, we can then see what we call the attack origin, or the entry point, which is the absolutely unknown by anyone, unknown website that caused all of these things to go on as a subsequent sequence of events, as we said, even across reboots. So we can then understand these important questions. So is there an infection? Well, yeah, we can tell you severity. We can tell you the activities. We can give you drill down into all of the events that have taken place on that machine or across the network. And we can then clearly understand, clean, and respond. So we can actually generate automatic scripts that lets us undo the events that the ransomware did on our network. Okay? So just again to highlight, we've only covered just a few of the technologies here, but there are also some very, very important angles within threat prevention that don't go away. Okay? IPS is there as a technology to help you at the perimeter stop known vulnerabilities from ever making it into your organization. You do need antivirus, be that gateway antivirus, be that endpoint antivirus. This is one of the best ways that we have of getting rid of known malware in an organization. We can offer emulation to help us with unknown malware from ever arriving in the network. We can give threat extraction the opportunity to give you the malware-free files fast. So again, incredibly important in the healthcare industry. We can use anti-bots, which will block and prevent the command and control conversations, be that from the endpoint devices or from traffic passing through the gateways, so we can prevent further damage or infection. And again, as you may know, one of the ways ransomware tries to activate itself is often by talking to command and control, by uploading the keys, the shared key or the private key that lets the encryption begin. And then behind all of these technologies is Checkpoint's Threat Cloud, which is where your gateways, where your endpoints go to get the real-time security intelligence from us as Checkpoint behind the scenes. Now, how, if we go back to the topic points that we had from the start of the webinar, what we've discussed today can help us prevent malware getting in using SandBlast as a perimeter prevention technology. We can use threat extraction to ensure we don't have any disruption to the user experience. The users get the clean files fast. So this helps us in our conversations as sort of IG people when completing kind of IG compliance areas. As we said, because we can run both emulation and extraction together, which is something that's unique, we can give you that clean content quickly that's malware free. Because we have visibility both at the network with the Checkpoint products and the endpoints, because we have the data loss prevention, we can make sure that we give you the visibility of any malware trying to get into the trust, but we can also give you the visibility to stop data that shouldn't be leaving the trust from doing so. And because we have that visibility from the network, from the cloud, from the endpoint, we can give you that much, much better ability to understand and remediate as well. So as far as questions we have, If anyone has any questions, again, by all means, type them into the chat. We'll try and address them now. Or if you'd rather, you can either send me and Steve an email, and we can try and cover off any questions or queries that you have. Again, I know with healthcare, not everybody wants to sort of talk openly and discuss issues that you may be having. So emails and follow-up is absolutely fine if that will be your preferred approach. But from me, what I'll do is I'll hand back to the guys at Bytes, and we can just close down the session from there. But thank you for your time today, guys.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Tom. Really, really appreciate it. I hope that was useful for everyone. We did have a question that had come in. There's a couple of questions that we've had come in throughout while you were talking. So I'm hoping you might be able to answer them for us. So the first one we got was, how can we trial/evaluate Sandblast or any of the other solutions? I don't know whether you can answer that for us, please, Tom?
Yeah, we can do that. So as far as trials, it doesn't matter whether you're a Checkpoint customer or not. As long as you can show us some data, so maybe a wiretap or a spam port from your network, we can place an appliance into the network just in a detection mode, and we can then highlight for you anything that is coming in and out that contains risk. Okay.
Cool, thank you very much. And the other question we've got is, how long does it take to emulate files, and what will the impact be on our network?
Okay, so as far as time to emulate, as you said, the emulation and extraction go hand in hand. So the extraction will give you the clean file in just a couple of seconds. The emulation, it depends on whether the file is actually clean or not. We've got the fastest emulation in the industry, and our times for emulation are up to a minute for a clean file, and up to maybe 4 minutes for a malicious file. The reason a malicious file takes longer is we do run the file a few times. So we run it up to 3 times. As far as impacting the network, you can do detection only, or you can do prevention. So you can obviously avoid anything bad coming in at all. And there is also an option that you have on how the engine runs. And that's called either background or hold. So what you can say is, I want to hold the connection, let the emulation take place for the first unknown file to be seen, and I won't ever let that file come in. Or I can run in what's called background mode, which again, when a first file comes in that's not been seen before, it's released to the user as well as being sent for emulation at the same time. Obviously, one is slightly better as far as user experience, but our goal and our view as Checkpoint is actually the speed that we have our technologies run at. We can run in hold mode, in prevent, and your users won't really be impacted. So hopefully that answers that question as well.
Excellent, thank you very much. So we've got quite a few questions. We'll try and get through as many as we can in the next few minutes. If for whatever reason we can't get through all the questions, what we'll probably do, Tom, is share those with you after the webinar, and then we'll respond to everyone with the answers and what the questions were. But I'll just quickly jump on to the next couple. So we've got, please can you confirm that Sandblast will inspect email links not embedded within files and test their actions? If it is ransomware and contacts a command server, will it then block this contact? As once a client is infected, there will be no further traffic. The damage is done and the client encrypts. This is then spread internally to file servers, etc.
Yeah. Okay. So yes, we can inspect links inside mails. So we can do that in antivirus, and we can do that in the emulation product. And again, keep in mind that the command and control conversation. So any file that is emulated, we actually take the network conversations from that malware and we check them up in our threat cloud to see if it is known malware. So again, we can actually block that command and control communication as well. As far as if something did get into the network from another means, with Sandblast Agent, with the firewall, you can actually kind of lock your environment down so you can restrict what is going to attack those individual machines as well. But yeah, that's something we will be comfortable to handle.
Excellent. I'm going to jump straight on to the next one. So can you clean encrypted traffic, and do you need a copy of the SSL cert?
Yes, we can do SSL, and you don't need necessarily, you need a SSL cert. So you need a certificate that is trusted by your endpoints, and you install that onto our gateways, and in doing so, yes, we can break open the SSL and look inside that traffic flow, yes.
Perfect. Next one, can you have multiple incoming connections to an appliance, i.e. we have our N3 connection, but we also have a direct broadband connection coming direct from the internet?
Yep, absolutely. So you could either, depending on how you want to deploy, you could either have one bigger gateway that's got one internet connection on one side, one internet connection on the other side, and then what we call virtual systems that live inside. So it's like having two virtual firewalls in one, both with their own little set of rules. And that box can then offload its emulation to a dedicated appliance or to the cloud. So yeah, we can handle that as well. Or again, if you'd rather just have dedicated appliance, so dedicated gateway for N3, dedicated appliance or gateway for internet, and then both of those appliances can share an emulator or share cloud if they wish.
Superb, thank you very much. So I think that's pretty much all the questions that we've got, almost dead on time. So I hope that was useful for everyone. It gives everyone just a little bit of an overview as to where sort of Bytes can help from a sort of networking security point of view and in connection with Checkpoint. So if there are any further questions, anyone wants to look at anything, then by all means drop myself an email. I will ping over my details as well, and we'll go from there. But I hope that was useful, and I look forward to speaking to you all soon. And thank you, Tom, for your time and running through that.
No problem, guys. Thanks everyone for the time.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Cheers all. Bye-bye.